Hi, welcome to the Stories Beside channel. Enjoy watching. Alexis, you should go home already. You've been coming in since the morning, and you're still late. So Alexis looked at her colleague and sighed heavily. She wanted to finish everything today so that tomorrow I could ask my son to come to the clinic tomorrow with a toothache. Do you think our boss won't resent it? He'll let me go. Of course he will. You're never absent. Besides, it's a kid. He'll understand. Don't worry. You can go home tomorrow. Alexis looked at the papers. Yes, it was probably better to go home already. She hoped Andrew wouldn't nag her too much. She hadn't prepared any food for tonight yesterday. Alexis hoped her husband would find something to feed the children. Alexis quickly put the finished papers in the correct folders, and she put the remaining packet in the top drawer of her desk, then locked it. Turning off the computer, she grabbed her bag and headed for the exit. Walking out of the building, she sighed in the fresh air with pleasure. It was already spring, and it seemed like it had only been December. It was an eternal race. Work, home, work, home. Alexis did not have time to keep track of time. That's how life would go by, and she wouldn't get a taste of it. What else could it be? They have children to raise, teach, and help. Then, if she and her husband don't work hard, it will be hard for them. Alexis and Andrew met at a mutual friend's birthday party. Silent and modest Alexis usually did not stand out among her peers, and not many people paid attention to her. But Andrew liked her for the fact that she did not try to draw attention to herself. Andrew was a good-looking guy, tall, trim, broad-shouldered, handsome, and charismatic. A lot of girls were attracted to him, but the guy was very picky. He didn't want girls to be just another pacifier. When he thought about finding a wife, he decided he needed to choose responsibly. He wanted a wife who would not run around shopping or going out with his girlfriends, but who would be the keeper of the home. And he found one. They started dating, and 6 months later, Andrew decided that Alexis would be the perfect wife. He proposed to her and she said yes. The wedding was very modest. Her and his parents, the witnesses, and them. Alexis really turned out to be a good wife. She didn't go around going to girlfriends, collecting gossip, or demanding expensive gifts. And Andrew was glad he chose her. And she was a nice girl. Of course, she did not shine with beauty, but she was not ugly either. But when she smiled, her face radiated a strange light. Andrew really fell in love with her. They both worked, saved money for an apartment, and lived in Andrew's one-room apartment. After a few years, they were able to save money. They sold Andrew's apartment and bought a two-room apartment. Then Alexis got pregnant, though Andrew said they needed to wait a little longer with children. They talked it over and decided to have the baby. Alexis was very afraid at the time that her husband would be against the baby. She was terribly ashamed to go to the doctor and say she wanted an abortion. But she survived, and they had their daughter, Haley. Oh, Alexis was so happy. She couldn't wait to have a baby. And for the first months after the birth, she did not even notice her husband. Alexis did not have time to get out of maternity leave. When her daughter was 2 years old, Alexis became pregnant again. That's when she got really scared. Andrew was scared too. They spent more than a week debating whether they could pull off 2 kids. Alexis cried every night. She thought about how she would probably have to terminate the pregnancy. But luckily, her husband was suddenly promoted. And it was so unexpected that there was no limit to his happiness. When he broke the news to his wife, Alexis asked him about the baby, and Andrew said that now they would be able to support 2 children as well. They decided to have a second child as well. Andrew planned to expand their living space. They could have swapped a 2-bedroom apartment for a 3-bedroom apartment. However, Alexis' second pregnancy was so difficult that there was no time to expand. She constantly went to doctors and was in the hospital several times. She was always prescribed expensive medications, which she could not always find. In general, they never bought another apartment. When Alexis had her baby, it became so hard that she couldn't even imagine. The son turned out to be very loud and nervous. He wouldn't let her sleep at night. He was always demanding attention. Alexis couldn't get away from him, and she had a husband and a 3-year-old daughter. And if her daughter got some attention from Alexis, her husband got none. Since then, the relationship between them changed slightly. Andrew got used to Alexis always picking him up from work. He serves hot dinner, takes it away, brings it in, cleans it up. And with 2 children, Alexis didn't so much as serve and fetch. She sometimes didn't even have time to cook. And Andrew would eat hastily cooked shop-made dumplings or choke on sandwiches he had cut himself. And when his wife cried, telling him that sometimes she didn't even have time to eat all day, he just frowned back at her. "You yourself said we could do it. You're on maternity leave, so you can manage. And I have to work. After all, I have a family of 4 people to feed." It was hard, right up until Joshua was 2 years old. He changed dramatically, became calm, stopped being moody all the time. He didn't wake up at night anymore. It was like a miracle. What made this happen? No one knew. Since his son had been sleeping soundly at night, his bed was now in the room where his sister slept and where the nursery was. And the relationship between Andrew and Alexis began to get better. The couple began to make time for each other at night again. Andrew was no longer in a bad mood, and Alexis calmed down and could smile again. When her son turned 3, Alexis put him in daycare, where their daughter was already going, and she got a job and had a better money situation. However, Alexis' well-being left a lot to be desired. Not only did she have children, cooking, cleaning, and laundry to do, but she also had work to do. Whereas previously household chores had taken up most of her day, now she was at work most of the day. Sometimes she had to stay late from kindergarten too. Alexis would pick up the children herself because it was on the way from work. Andrew drove to work by car, but he wasn't very comfortable picking up the kids himself. It wasn't on the way. And besides, he said there was nothing to waste extra gasoline. We had to save money. Alexis didn't mind. By the time Alexis got home, with the kids, it was about 6 p.m. She needed to feed the kids, cook for her husband, cook a meal, and do laundry the next day. If she had to bathe the children, she could barely get through half the chores. By 10 p.m. Alexis put the kids to bed and then finished the rest of the chores. Andrew, on the other hand, hardly helped her. After dinner, he sat down at the computer and worked again. Sometimes he just rested. When Alexis asked him to do something, he never refused or grumbled. But Alexis was ashamed to ask him often. She was a woman, after all. It's embarrassing to weigh household chores on a man. What kind of woman is that? It turns out that she can't cook dinner and keep the house clean. The only thing is that in terms of intimacy, there was a breakdown again. Alexis fell asleep every night. When Andrew pestered his wife, she never refused him. Sometimes she was even very emotional and sweet to him, but for the most part she hardly participated at all, which annoyed her husband very much. When he expressed his dissatisfaction to her, she answered him tiredly, "Andrew, I don't even have the strength to open my eyes. And you want me to take the initiative. I'm sorry, but you have to understand me." Andrew seemed to understand, but in his heart he was dissatisfied with his wife. Anyway, she has to manage everything. He has time to work, and then he also has time to help her. And he wants attention too. And his wife is always tired. Alexis shuddered and felt cold. Alexis frightenedly looked at her watch and groaned. She had been thinking so hard that she had been standing outside for 10 minutes. What was she doing? Andrew had probably already come home with the kids, and she was still standing there, remembering her life. No time to do that. Gotta run home and make dinner and do her daily routine. Alexis almost ran home. Waiting for the buses was useless. It takes about an hour to get home in the evening. She could be home in 30 minutes in a brisk walk, and anyone who looked at this woman from the outside would not find anything special about her. She was an average woman, about 35 to 40 years old, tired and always in a hurry. But Alexis was only 30 years old, and she did not think that her youth is quickly evaporating together with the endless races. From home to work, from work to the store, then home. And life was passing her by. And there was no one to lean on, no one to throw over, at least a small part of her responsibilities, at least a little time to devote to herself. When Alexis entered the apartment, she smelled eggs. What had her husband found to feed herself and the children? She quickly took off her shoes and came into the kitchen. Andrew frowned as he sat at the table. To his right sat Haley, to his left Joshua. His children were fiddling with their forks on their plates, scrambling for eggs. As soon as they saw their mother, they shouted, "Mom, Mom, fix us something to eat." Andrew looked angrily at his wife. "You're very late today," he said. "I've finished my work, so I can get out early tomorrow." Alexis answered in an apologetic tone. "Hi, darlings. What's wrong with Dad's food?" "It's scrambled eggs. They're very healthy." "It's burnt, Mommy, and it doesn't taste very good," Haley answered defiantly, crossing her lips. Andrew looked sternly at his daughter and said, "Eat what you're given. In my childhood, we couldn't breathe a peep. We didn't always have food on the table, so we were happy with what our parents gave us. But you're very capricious, Haley. I should do something about your upbringing." Alexis looked at her daughter, who lowered her head and left her fork alone, trying to smooth out the conflict. Alexis said affectionately to Haley, "Daddy's right. Eat what he made. Look, Joshua's plate is almost empty. And you eat. I'll go change and make pancakes and then have tea." "Okay." Haley looked up and smiled. She liked the idea of pancakes. She was even willing to eat those nasty eggs for the sake of it. The girl picked up her fork again. Andrew looked at the girl carefully, then looked away. It was obvious that he was not in the mood. Alexis decided to placate him too. "Shall I bake you a quiche, Andrew?" Andrew glumly answered no. "Why not? Let me bake it for you. It's quick. I bought such delicious apples yesterday." Then Andrew lost his temper and shouted, "I don't want your quiche. Leave me alone. It only makes me feel better. Or do you want me to get fat? Leave me alone. You can make it if you want, but you have to eat it yourself." The children fell silent, looking at their father fearfully. Alexis remained standing there with her mouth open. After a minute, Andrew quietly said, "Sorry, I'm just tired. I will go to bed tonight. My head really hurts." Alexis bit her lip, trying not to cry. She had hoped so much to shift some of her husband's responsibilities today. She wanted him to put the children to bed, and she would prepare food for tomorrow in peace. That is, she would have gone to bed early, but her hopes were not realized. Andrew went to his room. Alexis quickly made pancakes, fed them to the children, then bathed them and put them to bed. Then Alexis, sighing heavily, came into the kitchen again. As she cooked, she thought of only one thing. Why were she and Andrew so distant from each other? Yes, of course, many couples go through such difficulties with 3 or 4 children each, but that doesn't mean you have to give up on them. They're supposed to be not only parents, but husband and wife. And lately, they haven't been acting like spouses. Whichever way you look at it, Andrew hasn't hinted for a long time, hasn't pestered her for intimacy. And Alexis realized that now she was beginning to worry. Maybe she should take the initiative herself. After all, she should. Andrew himself had hinted at it several times. When Alexis had finished everything in the kitchen, she decided to go to her husband instead of doing the laundry. Andrew was still awake. He was reading something on his phone. When Alexis walked into the bedroom, he quickly put the phone aside. Alexis got carried away, got close to her husband, and smiling, whispered, "I missed him so much. I miss being caressed." She wanted to say something else, but Andrew took her hand off his chest and firmly said, "Alexis, I am tired. Let's not start that some other time." Alexis blushed with shame and resentment. She was not used to getting rejected because she herself had never been almost to her husband. and she thought Andrew would take her hints with enthusiasm. But that was not to be. Her husband turned away from her, turned off the earpiece at his side, and fell silent. Alexis stared at him for a few minutes, then frowned. Some suspicions arose in her mind. When she walked into the room, Andrew was smiling. He was reading something on his phone. What was he looking at that was so interesting and funny? Wasn't there someone on his side? But immediately Alexis tried to banish these thoughts. No, it just couldn't be. She knew she was the best wife. He had told her that 1,000 times over the years of marriage. He just couldn't do that to her. But the doubts didn't go away. They only grew stronger. So why had their relationship gone bad? He has become so angry and nervous, and is constantly rude to her, and they hardly ever talk, laugh, or spend time together. Maybe he has someone else to spend time with. Alexis was tormented by these moments and suspicions. An hour later, when her husband was already sound asleep, she was still awake. She slowly got up and walked around the bed, gently picking up his phone on the nightstand. She turned away from the bed, unlocking it. She looked at his recent calls and message. There it was. This is what she was looking for. His last message was just this one from about an hour ago. Some woman named Kaylee was texting him. She called him sweet, said she missed him a lot and was looking forward to seeing him. And Andrew responded with a bunch of smiley faces, hints, kisses, hearts. That's all. Alexis was now convinced that it was not without deception and the presence of a stranger. She put the phone back on the nightstand with shaking hands and then left the room, going into the bathroom. Alexis covered her face with a towel and howled softly so as not to wake anyone. Well, and to let out her pain, resentment, and anger. He was cheating on her after all. She trusted him. They have 2 children. He decided that they were all unworthy of love, of attention. He decided to pay attention to another woman. After 10 minutes, Alexis calmed down and went back to bed. Closing her eyes, she thought about trying to keep the family together by any means necessary. In the morning, they got up before the children. Alexis made her husband breakfast. He was eating breakfast. She thought about starting the conversation now or waiting until the evening, but she couldn't wait. If she was going to try to keep the family together, she should start as soon as possible. When she began the conversation about the other woman, an unpleasant expression appeared on Andrew's face. He was both surprised, frightened, angry, and irritated. He responded angrily to his wife's accusations. Since when did you start going through my things? How long have you been following me? Or have you been following me from the beginning? I'm very disappointed, and I wasn't expecting this. Alexis, out of habit, started apologizing. Andrew, it was an accident. I didn't mean to upset you at all, to disappoint you. I just love you. I want to be with you, and I need you. I can't be without you, honey. Tell me it's not serious. You have to tell me. But Andrew responded to her pleas and assurances of love even more aggressively. But I don't need you anymore. I'll tell you this. If you'd minded your own business, I'd have thought it over for a while. Maybe I'd have stayed with you. Well, since you found out all by yourself, then that's the way it should be. So our marriage is over. That's it. That's it. Alexis started crying quietly. No, just don't leave us. Don't leave me. We have 2 children. Please, Andrew, come to your senses. But Andrew objected. The 2 children that only you wanted. Don't tell me that I was crazy happy when you got pregnant. After all, that's a pure lie. Alexis continued to cry quietly. Then it was time to wake the children. Andrew, please, let's talk tonight. I'm begging you. Let's all think again. Andrew didn't answer anything. He finished his coffee and left for work. And Alexis wiped her tears, sighed, and went to get the children ready for kindergarten. All day Alexis was distracted. She almost forgot that she wanted to take her son to the clinic. She remembered just in time to ask the boss for an appointment, and then rushed to the daycare center to pick up her son. Andrew, too, thought a lot about the situation during the day. Yes, it wasn't very pleasant, but there's nothing to be done. It had been coming to this for a long time. The relationship in the family had deteriorated, and he no longer loved his wife, as he did not seem to love her at all before. She was not, after all, the wife he had dreamed of. Yes, she was a housewife, decent, quiet, and obedient. But it turned out, it was not enough. She ceased to excite him. And he was tired of her, always looking the same, not transforming for him, not always taking care of herself as she should have. If before he had been happy that Alexis didn't stand out from the other women in any way, now it pissed him off. Before, he didn't want his wife to be looked at, but now he wanted a woman around him who would get his attention. And he didn't think about the fact that such a woman would attract more than just his attention. And such a woman was found. A few months ago, he had met Kaylee. They ran into each other at work. She was their client, and it was Andrew who had to have contact with her. Their communication very quickly grew into something more than just polite communication. They immediately felt attracted to each other. Kaylee was a gorgeous woman. He couldn't take his eyes off of her. She was exactly the kind of woman he deep down wanted to have around him, but was afraid to. Such a woman would always attract the eyes of those around her. And Andrew was very jealous. He could not tolerate such a thing. But now that he was already married to Alexis, he realized that he still wanted to be near a spectacular woman, not a gray mouse. And Kaylee won him over. There was one more thing that played a decisive role in the beginning of their love affair. Kaylee was a wealthy woman. She was already married, and her husband was a rich man. About 5 years ago, her husband died, and his fortune was left to Kaylee. And now she was living her life to her satisfaction. Andrew looked greedily at her gold jewelry, at her car. He could not even imagine how much it all cost. And when, after her first night of love with him, Kaylee gave him a watch, he was subdued. He had hinted to her several times that he could separate from his wife and marry her, but she never made him any promises. She answered his questions evasively. That was one of the main reasons why Andrew still hasn't left his wife. But since Alexis found out about everything, there was no point in him staying married. He should leave her, move in with Kaylee. He would tell his sweetheart, and she would beckon him with a finger. She will graciously let him live in her big fancy house, and he will be so polite and affectionate to her that in the end she cannot live without him. And she herself will ask him to marry her, so that no one else will have him. That's the way it is. Yes, that's how it will be. And he will be rich. He won't be able to work. He'll be able to live for his own pleasure. He'll finally be able to think beyond the children and their illnesses. He was so terribly tired of it that he had no more energy. So in the evening he waited for his wife to talk to him herself. He could see that Alexis was going to beg him again to forget about the other woman. She even wore a dress for the occasion and tied her hair in a regular ponytail rather than a sloppy cradle. He told his wife that he was going to leave, that he couldn't live with her anymore, and that he loved that other woman, loved her so much that he was willing to sacrifice everything for her. Alexis practically begged him on her knees not to leave them. It was obvious that she was very worried, but he didn't care anymore. And Andrew packed up some of his things and left, and he never came back. And Alexis was in a panic. Her life was broken. She expected to spend her life with one person, and that person would be Andrew. The children didn't understand anything. Or rather, Joshua didn't really understand what was going on. He didn't usually see much of his father around him. And for the most part, Dad was busy all the time. But Haley realized something was going on when her father didn't come home for 3 days. She asked Mom, where is Dad? Is he not coming home anymore? Looking his mother in the eye. Seriously, Haley asked. Alexis wanted to lie. Then she decided her daughter didn't deserve it. She realized it wouldn't be fair. She's the one who teaches her children to always be honest with everyone. What kind of example is she setting for them? And Alexis told her daughter cautiously, choosing her words, "You see, daughter, daddy is not a thing. And we can't force a man to do something against his will. Daddy didn't feel well, and that's why he left. He loves you, but he and I are with him. God, Alexis had no idea you could explain a situation that hard. But this situation was not the easiest. Her daughter, however, was the smarter of the two. What was everyone thinking? He's got another family, Mommy. He won't live with us anymore. He has found other children. Alexis hurried to reassure her daughter. No, Haley, he doesn't have another family. He doesn't have other children. And he's not going to find new ones. He does have one. You will be his children forever, and he will see you. He will be your beloved daddy forever. Well, yes, we won't live together anymore. Daddy and I are separated because we are more, because we can no longer treat each other with consideration and courtesy. Alexis was afraid her daughter would start pestering her with all sorts of questions, but Haley just sighed contentedly and answered, I see. Well, Mommy, we'll take care of each other from now on. Don't you worry. We'll never leave you. Alexis could barely hold back her tears, and at night she covered her mouth with a towel, sobbing and howling in pain and resentment. And many nights in a row Alexis spent without sleep. She began to suffer from insomnia and was constantly making mistakes at work. Her partner often covered for her because she saw that Alexis was taking her grief very hard. Andrew, on the other hand, was doing just fine. Kaylee took him in. He was pressing pity, saying that his spouse was a monster and that she had almost kicked him out of the apartment with her head and then threw his suitcase out after him. And he, poor guy, had to get dressed in the entryway, and even the neighbors saw him. Kaylee opened her eyes in amazement as she listened to him. When Andrew said that for Kaylee's sake, he was even willing to sacrifice himself, the woman even shed a few tears, and she took Andrew in, and he needed it. The only thing left to do was to marry her, but he was sure he would soon achieve that. And so Andrew's life began. He divorced his wife, though she begged him for a long time not to leave his children. He even quit his job because he didn't have time to work. And why should he when he got what he wanted? Kaylee was providing for him now. They constantly traveled, had fun, and enjoyed all the blessings of life. Andrew didn't think about his ex-wife, and he didn't think about his children either. Sometimes he went out with his children, but just to make a mark. He would go to the park or to the movies, and that was it. That was the end of his fatherly duties. He did not provide them with money, because all the money was with his mistress, whom he could not make his wife. And there was no use in filing for alimony, because Andrew was now unemployed, and Alexis had a very hard time. After the divorce, she had to sell her apartment to split the money in half. With her husband, she had enough for a one-bedroom apartment. She even had some money left over for a rainy day. All of her worries left a mark on her. She was very nervous. She didn't sleep well, and she made mistakes at work all the time. She didn't have time for anything. She tried to survive with the children on her salary. She struggled with that. And then she applied for child support. And they also paid her an allowance for the fact that her salary was not enough for each member of her family to live on. When she got those payments, it got a little easier. She was even able to save money. The children took the parents' divorce calmly. It had been a long time since they had received the long-awaited attention from their father. They always got everything from their mother. Alexis was to Joshua both Haley, mother and father at the same time. As time passed, their father came less and less into their lives, but they did not suffer much. On the contrary, they were glad they did, because their infrequent visits made everyone uncomfortable. They had nothing to talk about with their father. He ignored them. There was nothing in common between them. Of course, the children dreamed that things would change, that he would love them again. So far, that wasn't happening. And they didn't really like going out with Andrew because of that. As time went on, the kids went off to school. First Haley, then Joshua. Money was getting more and more expensive, but Alexis somehow managed to cope with all the problems and hardships. She still didn't ask her husband for money herself, And then the big grief happened. Alexis felt worse and worse every day. Although it had been a long time since the divorce, she had recovered almost completely, but her well-being had not improved. On the contrary, she began to rapidly lose strength. It was hard for her to do everything she had done before with ease. No, it didn't happen all at once, but gradually. But at first Alexis just didn't pay attention to it. However, when she found it hard to get up in the morning, she got a little scared. One day she could barely get herself out of bed to get the children ready for school and go to work. She felt so sick that she barely made it to the bathroom, and then threw up. She hadn't eaten anything for the night, though. Alexis thought she should get her stomach checked. Maybe her gastritis had worsened. Yeah, she probably lost a little weight, too, it seems. That's because she hasn't had much of an appetite lately. She somehow made it to work. And her partner Brianna said, looking closely at Alexis, "You're looking worse and worse every day. You should see a doctor." Alexis sighed heavily and closed her eyes. She had used up the last of her strength for her first walk to work, and she had almost been late today because she had stopped often. She felt so dizzy. "Yes, my gastritis has worsened. I've been eating so bad lately. I have no appetite at all. I'll get some pills and it'll go away. I just need to heal a little bit." But Brianna shook her head. "Alexis, it's not gastritis. Look at you. Do you look very bad? You have lost a lot of weight. You look so pale. There are bruises under your eyes, and you don't know what kind of pills you're going to buy if you don't even know what it is. Don't joke about it. It's not nothing. It's your health. You got kids to raise, and you're spitting all over yourself. If not you, who's gonna take care of the kids? My advice to you, go to the doctor. Don't wait too long. Do you know how many cases like this happen nowadays? Everything seems normal, and then one day someone dies. I don't want to scare you, but you look like you have something much more serious than gastritis. Maybe you need to go to the hospital. They will treat you. You'll come out with renewed vigor." "What hospital, Brianna? I got kids. Who's gonna stay with them?" "No, there's no hospital. I can't leave them alone." Brianna said reproachfully to Alexis, "No one will want your children. If anything happens to you, that's scary. What if you go to the hospital? Well, is there anything you can think of?" "I think you should think about what I said." And Alexis thought about it. She thought about it all day long and came to the conclusion that she needed to see a doctor. She was sure there was nothing serious wrong with her, but she needed to make sure it was for sure. So the next day, Alexis took the day off and went to the clinic. She told the doctor that her stomach hurt sometimes. Nausea in the morning, no appetite. The doctor listened to her carefully, then felt her stomach, frowned, prescribed a referral for an ultrasound. Alexis was so happy that she was able to get an examination right away. But when she got the result and went back into the doctor's office, the doctor only frightened her even more. He said that she had many more tests to go through, a bunch of tests to take, x-rays to take, and a bunch more stuff. Alexis didn't understand what the problem was. And the doctor said you had a tumor of some kind. "I cannot say for sure that we can definitively decide on the diagnosis. When you do the full examination, I will write you a referral. Almost everything will be free, but you will have to pay for some things." The doctor said something else, but Alexis did not understand him well. "Tumor? What tumor? What does it mean?" "It's serious. It will take a long time to heal." All the questions remained unanswered. Alexis took a week of unscheduled leave. The boss didn't like it very much, but he let her go because he saw that Alexis really didn't look good and let her heal better, because her work seemed unsatisfactory to the boss lately. Alexis had tests done, had an examination. She did everything the doctor told her to do. And when she came back for another appointment, she didn't hear anything good, although she hoped the doctor would reassure her. Alexis had stage 3 gastric cancer with metastases not operable. She already had no more than 6 months to go without treatment. If she had maintenance treatment, she might live another year or so, but no more. There could be no mistake. She would die soon. To say she was in shock, that's not to say anything. She was just terrified. All the anxiety and turmoil of the divorce had taken its toll on Alexis' health. She had never been in good health, and the turmoil had caused irreversible damage that couldn't be undone. If Alexis would have turned earlier, if she would have gone to the doctor after the first symptoms appeared, she would have been fine. But when Alexis began to lose weight rapidly, when she developed abdominal discomfort and constant weakness, she simply wrote off those symptoms to excitement and worry, and then to gastritis. And she had been inactive for so long, and now it was too late. No one else could help her. The doctor prescribed her medication, which had to be taken constantly so that her condition wouldn't deteriorate too quickly. And Alexis asked chemotherapy. Can't I have chemo or something? Would that help me maybe? Isn't that impossible? The doctor looked at her doubtfully. Why is it impossible? It is possible. But in your case it won't help. Of course you can hope for a miracle. But that is not for medicine. As a doctor, I'm telling you that it will probably be useless. But if you want, I'll give you a referral for you to be registered, to see an oncologist, and he will tell you everything in detail. And Alexis was prescribed chemotherapy pills. The drug was domestic, and it was free. But Alexis found out that there were imported pills, which were very expensive. But many patients recommended, so she went into her rainy day fund and bought these pills and started taking them, hoping for a miracle. But no miracle happened. Time passed, and with each passing day, Alexis felt worse, thinner, weaker, and weaker. And she realized that this was the end. She was definitely going to die. She didn't tell her children that she was terminally ill. She just said she was sick, but she would get better soon. But her children were not fools. They loved their mother too much. She was the only person close to them. When she got really sick, she couldn't even go to work anymore. She was fired for health reasons. The money was gone very quickly. A month later, not a trace of her savings was left. Running around in hospitals, collecting certificates and statements for benefits, applying for disability. All of this took so much energy that Alexis' condition worsened every day, and it came to a point where she just couldn't get out of bed. Haley and Joshua were very worried about their mother. After all the events, their parents' divorce, their mother's illness, they had to grow up early, and they both cared for Mom, helped out. She wasn't left alone in the evenings. They understood that their mother had something serious and that it wasn't a joke. Alexis paid a nurse from the clinic who gave her the treatments she needed. A neighbor cooked for Alexis and her children. The children listened to their mothers moaning at night. Haley often went over to her mother to get her water, or to fix her pillows, or to give her painkillers. She even learned how to give shots, and Alexis cried as she watched her small but so grown-up daughter take the medicine, with a serious look into the syringe, and nothing could be done. When Alexis felt that she became quite ill, she was frightened. The whole time she was sick, she thought about what would happen to her children. And now she was really scared, because she couldn't find a way out. She just had no idea what was going to happen to them. So Alexis called her husband, even though he hadn't shown up to see the children in over a year. She hoped he hadn't gone anywhere, because she had no one else to hope for. Andrew didn't go away. Alexis was lucky. He was in town, but he didn't want to go out with her. But Alexis insisted, and she had such a strange voice that Andrew decided to come talk to her when he went to her apartment the next day. Then he was frightened. He didn't know she was sick. With children he had not spoken to or seen in a very long time. He was struck by the squalid appearance of the room in which the three of them were huddled. He was shocked by Alexis' appearance. She looked like a living skeleton. She looked about 70 years old at least. Alexis got right to the point. She didn't tell him about her diagnosis, describing everything she had to put up with. She just sent the kids out on the street, and she told him, "I'm dying, Andrew. I don't have much left. I can feel it. I wondered for a long time what would happen next. Our children will be all alone, but they have you. I didn't ask you for anything. You didn't pay alimony. You didn't help us. I dragged it out on my own as long as I could. But now I can't do anything anymore. I'm going to die soon, and you're going to have to take the kids with you. You're all they have. My parents are dead. They have no one else, and you have to take care of them after I die. You have to take them. They are your children. They should be with you. You must raise them. Don't leave them. I beg you to take care of them. That's all I ask of you. I beg you, promise me that you will take care of them. Then I can die in peace. Then I will no longer fear for their fate. Alexis hoped for understanding and sympathy. She was sure that in such a situation her husband would prove to be a man. After all, she had married him because she knew he was a real man, and she had always been sure of that until the moment he had left them. But now he just had to do the manly thing. But she was wrong. Andrew had changed too much to be able to rely on him. Andrew frowned, looked around the room again, then looked at his ex-wife again. That's impossible. I'm sorry you're in such bad shape, but I won't promise you anything because I don't want to take the kids with me. Kaylee will never agree to that. That's first of all. And second of all, I don't need it at all. You were the one who wanted those children. You were the one who insisted on having them. I didn't want us to have 2 children in a row in the first place. I had very different plans for my life. That's why I'm telling you that I'm not going to have them with me. That's out of the question. I don't need them, Alexis. You needed them. So you figure out something else. But I'm not taking them. I have another life where children have no place. Alexis didn't know what to say. Her heart squeezed with pain and fear. How, Andrew, what should I do? She whispered. Andrew indifferently shrugged his shoulders. I don't know. It's your problem. Put them in an orphanage. You know, there are a lot of married couples now who want to have children. They can. Maybe they'll get lucky and somebody will get custody of them or adopt them. But I refuse to have them. In fact, we're going abroad soon, and I'm willing to do something useful for you. I'll go to a lawyer to draw up all the necessary documents. I will give up the children, and they will be completely free. They can be safely adopted later. That's all I can do for you. And I think that's more than enough in this situation. And Andrew turned and left without saying goodbye. When the front door to the room slammed, a crying Haley came in. When her mother told them to go outside, Haley sent her brother away and stayed in the kitchen to listen to her mother and father talk. And she heard everything. She walked over to her mother. Alexis looked at her daughter. She didn't know what to say. Haley knelt in front of the bed and leaned toward her mother. Alexis struggled to lift her hand and wiped the tears from her daughter's face. Haley stroked her mother's dry, sunken cheek and said softly, "Mommy, I love you so much. You are the most beautiful thing in the world to me." Alexis felt tears run down her face from the pain and love for her daughter. Her heart ached. She contemplated Haley's face as if it were the last time she had seen her. "Thank you, sweetheart. I love you so much. And Joshua, you heard everything. I'm sorry you heard. Why did you stay home? Why didn't you go outside? Daughter, I heard everything. That's why I stayed home, because I wanted to hear with my own ears. I kept wondering why Daddy wasn't coming to see us. Now I know he just doesn't like us. Well, that's okay. We don't love him either. We only love you. Don't say that. He just loves you. He's just lost his way. He said one thing now, but then he'll change his mind. I hope so. I really hope so. I don't want him to change his mind. I don't want to live with him. And neither does Joshua, I'm sure. Mom, do you want me to show you my drawing? I drew it at school the other day, and the teacher gave me 2 A's. And she said I could be an artist. Of course I do. Quietly, Alexis whispered, trying not to moan from the pain that suddenly appeared. Haley quickly went to her desk, rummaged among the papers, and then brought her mother a drawing. Alexis looked at him lovingly. Haley has been drawing since she was a little girl. Good. So well that Alexis wanted to send her to art school. But at first there was no money, and then no time to drive her to that very school. It was only an hour-and-a-half drive on the other side of town, so the girl's talent was not developed in any way. However, Haley herself was constantly practicing, and at school, she had a very good art teacher. She immediately saw that the girl had a real talent, and she always encouraged and helped her, taught her all the little things and important things. The drawing was done just perfectly. Haley drew Alexis with a bouquet of lilacs. Every feature on her mother's face was perfect. This was Alexis when she was young. There were feelings in this drawing. You could even tell she was happy in this drawing. Alexis sighed, suppressing a groan of pain, and whispered to her daughter, "I'm sure you have a great future, and you'll become anything you want to be. You have such talent. Remember that. You better always be sure of that. Never give up. And you will succeed. I'm so sorry you have to go through all this. I'm so sorry I have to leave you. Please don't leave your brother. Be together always. No matter what happens, never lose sight of him. Try, please, Joshua. He's just a baby for me to tell him that. And you're little too, but I feel like you're my age. Forgive me, little one, my beloved. I'm so sorry for what happened." Alexis could no longer hold back a moan. She leaned back on the pillow and moaned, closing her eyes. Haley immediately put the drawing aside and began to take the medicine, and began to draw the medicine into the syringe. Then she gave her mother a shot. When Alexis felt a little better and she began to drift off to sleep, Haley quietly said to her, "I promise you that we will be okay, and that Joshua and I will be there for each other." "I promise you, Mommy." Alexis smiled slightly as she looked at her daughter, then closed her eyes. That was the last time she saw her daughter. She never woke up again. Alexis lay in unconsciousness for 3 days. She no longer regained consciousness, only moaned, sometimes, and twirled her head on the pillow. She no longer ate, drank, or went to the bathroom. Haley made Joshua go to school and stayed home with her mother. She wanted to be there for her when Mom was gone. She thought it would be easier for Mom. She thought it would be better for her too. She wanted to support her mother. A nurse came to see them twice a day, morning and evening. On the 3rd day, the social workers came. They wanted to take Haley and Joshua to the orphanage, but Haley raised such cries that they were confused. That's when the neighbor said she would watch the children while Alexis was still alive. That was not a desirable thing to do, but the social workers didn't insist. And on the 4th day, Alexis passed away without regaining consciousness. Joshua wept bitterly, and Haley just kept quiet. She wept all her tears while her mother was sick. And now that her mother was gone to another world where there was no pain, no longing, no horror, no grief, then Haley calmed down. No longer would her mommy be in pain. That was the most important thing. Mommy was buried. There were only a few people from work at the funeral. A neighbor and social workers. Very few people came to see Alexis off to the next world. But it was even better that way. She never liked crowds of people around her, public places, and attention to her person. After her death, Alexis got what she had been striving for all her life. She had only the closest people around her. Andrew did not come to the funeral. He went abroad with his mistress. After the funeral, Haley and Joshua were taken to the orphanage. The day before, Haley had a conversation with her brother. "You don't have to be afraid. I will be there for you, and you must be strong. After all, it's just us now. And you don't have to cry or get upset. We're going to be all right. Promise me you'll be strong." "I promise," sobbing, the boy said. The orphanage was not as bad as they thought. Most importantly, the staff there was wonderful. Joshua and Haley bonded with the caregiver Madison and the nurse Stara. These women had hearts of gold, and almost all the children at the orphanage loved them. These women were the only ones who could put the bullies in their place who didn't listen to the other adults. Caitlin, the head of the orphanage, was also a good woman, but she was very strict. She had no children of her own, and she treated all the children as if they were her children. However, she did not show her affection and love openly. She preferred to hide it behind strictness, There was no other way. After all, the foster children already had those who would pity and caress them. The same Madison or Sarah, and who would keep them strict if not Caitlin. Joshua quickly adjusted to life in the orphanage. Haley, on the other hand, couldn't get used to it. She missed her mother so much, and she was very angry with her father. She told her mother before she died that she didn't care that he didn't love them and was abandoning them. But that was a lie. She suffered a lot because her father didn't want her and Joshua, but she would not admit it to anyone, and she promised herself that she would never tell anyone how much it had hurt her to have them sent to an orphanage when her father was alive. "Hello, Hannah. I haven't seen you in a while, have I? You must have been away somewhere." Hannah looked at Madison and smiled. "Hello. Yes, I was in Europe on business. Couldn't get away for a long time. I missed the kids a lot. I brought them a lot of presents, and new clothes and gifts, and stationery and books. I think everyone will like it. How are you kids doing here?" Madison smiled. "It's okay. The kids missed you too. But I'll admit, it's probably more your gifts that you spoil them so much. No one does as much for the kindergartners as you do. You are our benefactor." Hannah woman looked away embarrassed. "Stop it. Really, you say that every time. I'm already embarrassed. I would have brought gifts in secret, but I just want to hang out with the kids. It's creepy." Okay, I'm sorry. Go on. Have a good time." Hannah smiled again and went to the main break room where the kids gather. Hannah was 40 years old and had no children of her own. Or rather, she had at one time, but not anymore. Long ago, Hannah married a rich foreigner. He moved to Russia, and soon they had twins, a boy and a girl. When the children were 4 years old, a great misfortune happened. Her husband and the children were in a car accident. He was driving them from kindergarten when a bus collided with them. The car veered badly on the wet road, and they crashed into a pole. They didn't have time to get them out for some reason. The car exploded right away. All three were killed instantly. Hannah still couldn't understand how she had managed to keep her sanity, how she hadn't lost her mind. Then by what miracle had she survived? She wanted to lay hands on herself, but it was as if angels were protecting her from that terrible step. It took her several years before she could come to her senses. It was not until 5 years after the accident that she was able to speak the names of her dead children aloud. She did not blame anyone for that terrible misfortune, but she kept trying to understand why she had suffered such grief. What had she done wrong? That fate had taken from her the most precious treasure in her life. She did not know the answer to that question. As the years passed, she began to feel worse. She was so bored that she couldn't find a place to live. There was a time when she moved from place to place every month to somehow take the pain out of her heart. She changed cities, countries, continents, but nothing helped. And then she had a dream in which she saw a large building. From the windows of that building, children looked out. They were all waving to her, inviting her in, and Hannah went in. And when she entered that building, she felt such peace and joy. Here she found the meaning of life again. And Hannah realized what she needed to do. She decided to do charity work and take on the patronage of some orphanage. She returned home and began to look for the right institution. And almost immediately, she came across this orphanage. She really liked the director. She spoke so warmly of the children, and she wanted to take over another orphanage, but they refused her help there. And the supervisor was such an unpleasant woman that Hannah didn't want to talk to her anymore. When Hannah entered the recreation room, many children rushed to her. With joyful shouts, the woman was hugging the children with a smile, holding some of the small children tightly to her. She took them in her arms and kissed them. And she felt so warm and good on her soul. She was able to give some of her unspent love to those who needed it so much. For half an hour, Hannah chatted with the children, telling them about Europe. Then the children began to move away from her to go about their business. Then Hannah looked around and noticed one girl near the window. She had not seen her before. The girl was drawing something, and she did not go near her. It she knew. Hannah approached the girl slowly, not to frighten her. The girl did not pay attention to her. "Hello, what is your name?" Hannah asked. The girl looked up sharply, a little frightened. Wow! When she was painting, she didn't notice anything around her. She probably didn't even notice when Hannah walked in, and how all the children ran to her. The girl was silent for about a minute. Looking at Hannah, the woman already thought that the girl would never speak to her, but she continued to stand beside her. "Haley," said at last the girl. "Hi, Haley. My name is Hannah. You can just call me Hannah." "Why?" After a little silence, the girl asked. Hannah frowned. "Why what? Why can I just call you Hannah? Don't you like your middle name? Don't you love your daddy?" "No, of course I love my daddy, and I love my mommy. They're not alive anymore. I miss them very much. I just love it when kids call me Hannah." "Do you have children of your own?" Hannah sighed. No child had ever asked her a question like that before. What a strange and clever girl. "No, I don't have children of my own, but I love children, so I come here and help the orphanage." "I see. It's nice to have someone helping out. You can't just leave your kids to fend for themselves. It's not right. It's good to have people who care about other people's children. Sometimes it happens so that their parents don't want their children either." Hannah became even more interested in the girl. How unusual she is, and she speaks so strangely, as if there were an adult in a child's body. "You were abandoned by your parents." Haley was silent for a few minutes, looking out the window, and then said quietly, but that voice got into Hannah's heart. "My mother is dead. My brother and I are alone in this world. And now we live here because our father doesn't need us. He gave up on us." Hannah felt such bitterness. God, the poor children, to have to endure so soon the death of their mother's father. Can such a man be called a father? It's a horror, but Hannah decided it was necessary to distract Haley from her bad thoughts. With a nod of her head, she pointed to the drawing. "Do you like to draw?" And then Haley's face lit up. Such a gentle, delightful smile. There was sadness in it too, but not so much. "I love it, except that my pencil is running out. My mother bought it for me. The other ones don't draw well. And this pencil was specially for drawing. My mom bought it in a special store. I don't even know where that store is. I didn't have time to ask my mom." Hannah could not take her eyes off the girl. What a poor but strong child. And a fool could understand that the girl is suffering a lot after her mother's death, but she is trying to be strong. Why does a child endure such hardships? And why do the other children in the orphanage also have different troubles and difficulties? Because that's life. Her children died so young, too. It was a terrible injustice. "Show me what you paint. Or is it a secret?" Hannah smiled slightly. Haley looked at the woman doubtfully, but nodded nonetheless. And then she showed her the drawing. And Hannah almost gasped. God, that girl had real talent. It was a close-up portrait of a woman. She was very beautiful. Her beauty was not expressed by perfect facial features or proportions. Her main beauty was in her eyes. Her eyes were so beautiful, as if they were the eyes of an angel. And they were so bottomless, as if a whole world lurked in them. Those eyes were also the eyes of one who loves and is loved. And Hannah guessed who it was. It was your mother. Haley nodded as she looked at the drawing, tears glistening in her eyes. She's very beautiful. Yes, she was the most beautiful in the world, and she will stay the most beautiful to me. You draw very beautifully. I've never seen a portrait of a real, live one. And I've seen a lot of things. You went to school somewhere. Haley shook her head. She stared at the portrait and was silent. Was Hannah looking at the portrait too? No, it was just unbelievable. How could such a little girl paint like that? Even the tiniest wrinkles, every hair was visible. Every detail was clearly shaped into a single character. This portrait had the soul, and not only of the person being painted, but also of the person who painted it. It's delightful. I like it very much. You're going to be a real artist. One day everyone will see what you can do, Hannah said affectionately. Haley smiled slightly and looked trustingly at the woman. Then she barely whispered, "My mother used to say that too." She thought so too. Hannah felt a craving for a hug, defenseless, and yet strong in spirit. They were silent for a while. Everyone was thinking about something else, and then Haley said, "Would you like me to draw you too?" "Me? You can draw me. But how? You don't have pictures, and I can't come here every day. I can only come once a week." Haley shook her head. "And I don't need pictures. I remember you. You have a very pretty face. I really want to paint you. Next time you come, I'll give you your portrait. That's all right. You don't mind. I can't draw you without your consent." "Of course you can. I don't mind at all. I'll come back next week. Maybe I can meet your brother." Haley nodded, and Hannah said goodbye to her. As she left, she asked Madison, "Where is this new girl from?" Haley, "Oh, those are unfortunate children. Haley and Joshua. I feel so sorry for them. Their mother died so young of cancer. Can you imagine? This poor girl was taking care of her sick mother all by herself. She even learned how to give shots, and she was by her side until the last moment." The caregiver told Hannah briefly the whole story about Haley and her brother. And the woman was outraged to her heart at what the children's father had done. What kind of monster would abandon his own children? How could he do such a thing? Hannah would have given anything to keep her children alive, but he threw the living children out of his life. So ruthless, so cruel. Poor children. The next week, Hannah went to the orphanage to visit the children again. This time, she brought sweets for everyone. But she had another gift for a certain child, and she wanted to give it to the child in person. When she had talked to all the children, she approached Haley, who was again sitting by the window, holding drawings in her hands. The girl did not approach Hannah with all the children, but waited patiently for the woman to be free. "Hello, Haley." "Hello, Hannah. I have something for you." "This is for you," and Haley held out her portrait to Hannah. And the woman was speechless. It was simply unbelievable. How could a girl paint her portrait, having only seen her once? And she drew it so accurately. But the most important thing was that she had accurately captured the expression in Hannah's eyes. Of course, Hannah herself saw herself in the mirror somewhat differently, and she perceived her eyes as something ordinary. It seemed to her that her eyes expressed nothing. But that was not true. Her eyes were expressing something important, and Haley saw it clearly and was able to convey it on paper. Hannah's eyes expressed pain. Of course, the girl did not know the cause of this pain, and she had simply put on paper her feeling from her first encounter with Hannah. But the woman knew it was the pain of losing her beloved children. And apparently, that pain never went away. It always lived and lives in her eyes. Hannah did not feel tears on her face until Haley herself touched her cheek. "Why are you crying? Didn't you like my drawing?" Hannah stroked the girl's head affectionately. "No, on the contrary. I liked it very much. You struck me to the core. And I have a present for you." Haley's eyes widened in surprise. "A present for me personally," which Hannah opened her purse and took out a small bundle. She held it out to Haley. The girl slowly unwrapped it in awe and gasped. There were branded pencils with stickers, sharpened and long. They were special pencils for drawing. The consultant at the store told me that they were the best pencils. They're very good for portraits. Look, there's a number on each pencil. It means softness. The bigger the number, the softer the pencil. I bought 2 of each and a special sharpener. Do you like it? Haley looked at the pencils with great care. Are you kidding? Of course I like them. Thank you so much for such a gift. I didn't think I'd ever have one. Thank you. And Haley looked at Hannah strangely, as if she were the closest person to her, and Hannah's heart trembled. This girl had captured her heart. From then on, Hannah came to the orphanage twice a week to visit Haley. She got to know her brother too. And Joshua turned out to be just as touching as his sister. There was more fear than pain in his eyes, but he tried not to look weak. He didn't let on that he was worried about anything. So small and already a real man. After a few months, Hannah realized that she had grown very attached to Haley, and she looked forward to every meeting with her. The girl's talent finally won her over. Her Haley showed her his drawings every time. And there were not only portraits. Haley drew everything in a row, and she was getting good at it. It was wonderful, but it was portraits that worked best for her, and the girl had a slightly uncanny, but so unusual ability to be able to feel people from the inside and put her intuitive feelings on paper. She could see not only the appearance of people, but also their essence. A few months later, she wanted to draw Hannah again, and she asked for permission. "I already gave you permission. Why do you ask again? And why do you want to draw me again?" Hannah asked with surprise. "Because I can't explain. It seems to me that you are different now. Have you changed in some way? I don't know if you'll understand, but I think I have. I just want to draw again." And she did. And Hannah was amazed again. This time she really looked different. There was no pain in her eyes now. There was joy and love in them. Yes, Hannah was finally able to overcome her sadness and grief, and it was all thanks to this incredible girl, Haley, and her bras. They couldn't make Hannah forget about her dead children, but they were able to banish her grief, and Hannah seriously considered adopting Haley and her brother. These children were destined for her by fate itself. They could not replace her dead children, but they could become her own children. And Hannah couldn't replace their dead mother, but she could become their adoptive mother. So Hannah decided to talk to the head of the orphanage. When Caitlin found out that Hannah wanted to adopt, she was overjoyed. "It's an incredible blessing that you decided to do this. I've been waiting for you to tell me that for so long. You just need a baby. I mean, you're so thoughtful and sensitive. You're going to be a wonderful mother. I always wondered why a woman like you couldn't have children. But now you've decided to make up for it. I'm so glad." Hannah didn't mention that she was already a mother of 2 children. Why would Caitlin know about that? "I want to adopt 2 children twice. 2 at once. But maybe you should think carefully before you do that. Maybe you'll get custody first. I don't want to say bad things about children, but all kinds of situations have happened in my lifetime. And there have been cases, and more than once, where children have been tried because they didn't live up to the expectations of the adoptive parents. And that's a hard thing to do. After all, the adoption process makes people full parents of a child, not his masters. And it's a whole process to just give up on a child. That's why I would advise you to get custody first. You'll get to know the children, live with them, and then adopt them when you're sure everything is okay." "No, I want to adopt 2 children at once. They are a brother and a sister. I want to adopt Haley and Joshua, and that's my final decision." Caitlin looked at Hannah carefully, as if she knew something about her dead children. And then she said, "Well, I can see that you're serious, and I won't go out of your way again. I will. I'd just like to ask them first if they want me to take them in and be their mother. We don't usually do that. With us, the parents choose the child, not the child of the parents. But I won't forbid it. You have done so much for our orphanage, and we are very grateful to you. But I will ask you not to let the other children hear you talking, or they will start demanding that we ask them whether they want to be adopted or not." And Hannah immediately headed for the playroom. She found Haley by the window. The girl was surprised that Hannah had come again. "You and I had just broken up. Did something happen? Why did you come again?" "Well, I didn't hesitate. Haley, how would you feel about me wanting to be your second mom, your foster mom?" Haley opened her mouth in amazement and fell silent. She didn't even blink, and then she said in a whisper, "But what about it, Joshua? I can't leave him. I can't. I want to, but I can't." Hannah did not torture the girl, and she said, Haley, I want to adopt you both. I want to adopt you and take you away from here so you can always be with me. So that's what you would want to do." Haley went pale at first, then blushed. Then her normal complexion returned to her face glowing. And when she said quietly, "I would want it more than anything in the world. I know you were sent to us by my mother. She promised me before she died that we would be okay. She told us to be patient and strong, and that we would be all right. And she sent you to us. Yes, yes, yes. I want you to be our mother. I want that more than anything in the world. And so does Joshua. I'm sure you don't even have to ask him. You're all he talks about." Hannah sighed with relief. All the puzzles finally came together. "That's good. All three of us are going to start a new life. Haley, you're ready now. Hurry up or we'll be late." Haley frowned at her brother as she entered the room. "Joshua, how many times have I asked you? Don't call me Haley. You're making me angry on purpose." But Joshua didn't even pay attention to her indignation. He looked admiringly at his sister from head to toe and whistled at her sister. "You look beautiful, you always have. But you look like an angel now, only in dark clothes." Haley smiled contentedly. Joshua never lies. And if he was giving her compliments, it was well deserved. Haley ran her palms over her waist and hips once more, peering into the folds of her black evening gown. "Thank you, darling. Well, I'm ready. Let's go." As they drove, Haley remembered how it all began. And it started the day Hannah adopted them. That amazing woman became their truest mom. And despite her wealth, Hannah was so human and kind that the children were crazy about her. The woman immediately got Haley into art school, and she and Joshua went back to the school they went to when their mother was still alive. As time passed, Haley and Joshua began to call Hannah Mom sometimes. But mostly they just called her by her first name, but they loved her just as much as they loved their mother. This woman had given them education, love, and affection, and they repaid her in kind. They became a real family itself. Now Haley was 27 years old and on her way to her first exhibition of her paintings. And Joshua, at the age of 24, was already the head of a successful travel company, which he created from scratch with his friend, who also became his partner. Hannah was proud of her children. For a year, she had lived only abroad. For health reasons, frequent flights were contraindicated to her, and since all her business was in Europe, she decided to settle down there. Now she lived in Italy, and unfortunately, she couldn't make it to her daughter's show. As she said, the doctor's flight limit had already been exceeded by 6 months. When Haley was in art school, all the teachers were delighted with her. After training, the girl realized that she was now ready to go out into the public eye, to open her own exhibition, which would feature the bulk of her best work from many years. She was already known by many in the city as a talented artist, and many dreamed of going to her exhibition. And some predicted such success for her that they were ready to buy her portraits and landscapes immediately at the first exhibition, only to sell them many years later as originals for many millions. When they arrived at the art gallery where Haley was exhibiting today, she was immediately covered by a maelstrom of people and congratulations. She was dizzy with excitement and worry, but she tried to act casual, and she was good at it. Her smile was enough to captivate anyone, and anyone who had seen her pictures would never forget her or her work. Andrew walked slowly through the gallery, sometimes looking at one painting and then another. But he wasn't invited here, but he was glad to be here. Apparently, not the last people were invited here, and he began to hope that he would find some chick of his own age who would be so lonely that he might be infatuated with him. Of course, he was fooling himself. Who would be attracted to him anymore? He was in his 50s, and he wasn't as handsome and fresh as he used to be. Life had taken its toll on him. He'd lived with his mistress for so many years, but he'd never been able to marry her. Years of nervousness about living with Kaylee on bird rights had not gone in vain. He had already had a heart attack, after which his mistress left him for a younger, more energetic suitor, and he was left with nothing. She left him almost naked and barefoot. He had no money and no job. It was a good thing he got a job in a parking lot right away. It wasn't a bad place, and sometimes he even got a good tip. Sometimes he got paid for wiping down the windows or the car itself. or cleaned the dirt off the tires, or inflated a flat tire. All in all, it was pretty bearable. Of course, it was so far from what he was used to living with Kaylee. But it was more than that. He was no longer capable of another job. No one would take him. And he wasn't used to working like that anymore. His brain, you might say, had atrophied. For years of idleness and idle life, he found an invitation card to an art show in the parking lot. It must have fallen out of someone's hand. Of course, if he had known whose ticket it was, he would have returned it. But he didn't. So he decided to go to the exhibition himself. Why waste a good thing? Especially since there's a free buffet, champagne, and various soft drinks. He can have a snack and even a drink here. He'll wander around with a glass of champagne in his hands and look at the paintings with an important view, pretending he knows everything. And then he saw a separate corner where the lighting was different. There were several portraits hanging there, and the light above them was slightly dimmed. And there were black frames around the portraits. Andrew was curious, so he went into that corner. When he looked at the portraits, he was dumbfounded. It was his ex-wife, Alexis. Yes, that was definitely her. He recognized her at once. Why are her portraits here? She had been dead for a long time. How could she? And then he frowned and looked at the inscription at the bottom of each portrait. Haley, Mother, God. Andrew looked again at the portrait. There was horror in his eyes now. Haley, that was his daughter. He remembered that his daughter had painted as a child, and often Alexis had said she would have liked to teach her daughter in art school, but it never worked out. But he realized that his daughter had become an artist after all. She was the one who drew the portrait of her mother. For a few minutes, Andrew looked at the portrait of his ex-wife in shock. She looked different here. She was glowing or something. Though she had been like that when they had met in her youth, her face had exuded that kind of light. That was how Andrew had come to like her. But how could Haley have seen that light if she had been born when it was no longer there? Andrew took his eyes off the portraits and looked around the room. His daughter must surely be here. She couldn't miss her first exhibition. Where is she? And then he saw her. God, yes, she had grown up. A real beauty. Not like her mother. Haley was so tall and slender. Andrew thought, proudly, that it was all this fault. And then he noticed the guy next to her, who was in a business suit. After a moment, Andrew realized it was his son. How he had grown. Had it really been so many years? He wanted to approach them right away, but then he changed his mind. He decided to wait until the whole event was over. It was almost 3 hours later. The whole time he was watching his children from afar, and a plan of action began to take shape in his mind. What do you think? Are you satisfied? Joshua smiled as he looked at his sister. Haley sighed. I got so many interesting suggestions. Too bad. Hannah is not here right now. I would have loved to share my joy with her. Joshua smiled and gave Haley a little hug. I'll go get the car. I'll wait for you. Haley nodded. Okay, I'll be there in a few minutes. Let me just take another look at my mom. Joshua left and Haley sighed and walked over to where the portraits of her mother hung. It had been her idea to put her mother's portraits in the same spot under different lighting. Joshua didn't understand why she had decided to display them in the gallery. But Haley wanted her mother here by her side on this triumphant day for Haley. She had been standing in front of her mother's portraits for several minutes when her brother approached her again. Come on, let's go. Haley smiled and nodded. And then they heard a voice behind them. Hello, children. Haley and Joshua turned around abruptly. At the sound of the voice, they stared at the man standing in front of them. And then Joshua felt Haley's palm shake in his hand. He squeezed it tightly, letting them know he was there. Why aren't you saying anything? Didn't you recognize me? You recognize me. I can see it in your eyes, Haley. What are you doing here? Haley said in an even tone. Oh, is this any way to greet a father? Daughter, could you be a little nicer? After all, I haven't seen you greeted in so many years. Why is that all of a sudden? Do we owe you or do you owe us anything? I don't think we owe each other anything. Andrew frowned slightly. This was not the way he had imagined their meeting. Really, Haley, don't make this worse than it has to be. It's as if you don't understand how much I love you. The circumstances that made me do this are terrible. And thank God they change. I wanted to find you. When my mother died, I was abroad. I couldn't come right away. I had things to do, but I came as soon as I could. I wanted to find you, but there were other people living in the apartment, and no one told me where I could find you. Knew nothing of your fate. I suffered so much. I suffered so much. How happy am I that I found you. Nothing will separate us now. We can be together again, and I will live with my children. I don't really care where I live. But I so wish I could be closer to you to make up for lost time. Andrew even let out a tear in emotion. His own words made him feel like he had pulled it off perfectly. He'd appeal to the kids, and they'd be happy to take him in, to take care of him. But when Andrew wiped his wet eyes, pretending to cry, he saw that his children did not react as well to his fiery speech as he had hoped. Haley and Joshua, stunned by such insolence. Their father abandoned them without even saying goodbye. And now he's trying to sell them something. That's the nerve. What are you talking about? The apartment was foreclosed on because of my mother's debts. Should they have told you that? Why are you pretending to be so innocent? You abandoned us. We know that. You're the one who suggested to Mom that she put us in an orphanage. And now you say you don't know where we went. Why do you lie to us? You never looked for us. You only thought of yours. What's her name? That's right, Kaylee, and you never thought about us. What happened now? I suspect your rich mistress doesn't need you anymore. Well, you need help too, right? But you've come to the wrong place. We don't have a father. We only had Alex's mother and Hannah's mother. Those two women played major roles in our lives, and no one else has anything to do with it. We don't owe you anything. Well, we're certainly not beasts of burden. If you need help in terms of care, we'll put you in a nursing home. We'll even pay for your stay there for as long as you need it. That's all we can offer you. Is that all you can count on? We have nothing more to talk about. Joshua stared at his father in silence and indifference, not saying a word. If Haley had any residual anger toward her father, her brother felt nothing for Andrew at all. Andrew went pale and backed away slightly. He hadn't expected this. He was sure his children would be happy to see him. He wanted to say something in his defense, but he could not find the words. After a minute, he just turned around in silence and walked away. And never again. Haley and Joshua never saw him. They knew nothing of his fate. Haley sighed and squeezed her brother's hand tightly. "How are you?" Joshua asked. "I'm fine. You know, I'm really hungry." "Let's go to the restaurant," Haley answered. Joshua smiled. The two of them looked again at the portraits of their mother. The past was over for good. Then they turned around and walked to the exit of the gallery.